Just want to say the music today, when you hear it, is Doron Zor, who has been here in the station a couple times. And now we have Darlene Madott. Right, Darlene? Did I say that right this time?
It actually was Madott, but the A was dropped at the border.
Madott.
It was 3 generations ago, but
What
Madott.
border? What border?
Canadian border.
From
Italy.
Italy. Okay.
But it wasn't
East
just
Coast.
Italians that was happening to. It was
everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to anglicize the name.
Assimilate.
So.
Yes.
Madott.
Yeah.
Madott.
Mystery
Madott.
name.
I have some, yeah. You could go on about that all day. Anyway, you got some, no, you're a lawyer.
I am a lawyer.
That's okay.
We throw
you,
pens in the
Darlene.
courtroom as well.
I didn't, you know, these things happen.
They do.
That's why you need a special invention, to keep the pen on the hand.
Like an elastic band?
Like an OptiGrad.
Yeah, there you go.
You know? Darlene, we're being silly.
We are. We're digressing
That's
from
okay.
the fact that,
That's okay.
that she uses pens all the time.
You know, it's a nice counterpoint to what I think is pretty serious fiction. Making Olives and Other Family Secrets.
Yeah,
One
no,
of
we
the
talked
books.
off air a little about what fiction really is when it comes to your writing.
Well, as a result of this book, half the family wanted to sue me, so I suppose this can
Really?
give you some kind of indication. Writers write about what they know,
Right.
and there's a dangerous territory that you sometimes pass when you draw upon your material.
Sure.
And in fact, I was so worried about that. The writer's block that propelled me into law school then had me writing a paper in law school on libel, fiction, and the charter. And I actually defined sort of a test for when a writer would cross the boundary. But I was staggered at how many American writers had been sued by siblings, by parents, and the chilling effects of libel lawsuits on fiction. When this book came out, about the only thing that saved me from getting sued was to have won the Bressani Literary Award for it. And but a letter that I received from a family member actually shut me down as a writer for about a year. And it took me a long time to recover from that, because what I was doing was celebrating family and the concept of family. And the characters may have resembled some actual family members, but they were composites. And one would think that people get this, but in fact they don't get it. And if it touches too close to the core, they're certainly not going to get it. So in this case, there were, and even my own sister, who was no part of the book, was quite upset with me and described the book as an embarrassment. I was actually hoping, as a lawyer in a way, that someone might sue me, because I know that inch space in the press counts for a lot.
Absolutely.
Not only that, but you can defend yourself.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
I probably could,
Lawyer's fees.
and I knew that it would be kind of like killing a chicken with a cannon, because I'm in a very aggressive litigation law firm.
But at the same time, like you say, it's family. You know, it's
Yeah.
not just a third person, you know, removed from you. This is family that you're talking about. And obviously, were they upset from the content for defamation, like you say, for libel, or?
I think my own theory is that they were upset at the truth.
Right.
Because writers of fiction don't have a truth defense. Now, if you're a journalist and you can say, well, I was writing about a public person, or I have the truth defense. So in writing fiction, I'm trying to get to the truth about human nature, but you don't have a truth defense.
Well, everybody has a revisionist type of history of their own life anyway.
Of course they do.
So, you know, it's you know, I remember it a different way. Well, okay.
So at the end of the introduction to this, I sort of addressed that. I said that I had, if I'd failed in holding you up to the light truthfully, with compassion, reverence, and love, I'm truly sorry. I do this as I must, despite the consequences, in celebration of you. I do this in loving memory of those who have lived and whom I have loved, so that at very least their stories might continue. So in writing fiction, I had to write. I had to write out of these stories, and if I bottled it up, one of my short story collections is called Bottled Roses. If I bottled it up, I actually had a physical manifestation of that, almost a choked. And so it wasn't until I wrote some of these stories that I discharged that that sense of constriction.
Well, there's a catharsis, I guess, for you to just kind of release it and get rid of it. Whereas, do you find like a lot of your family members are still holding it in, and that's what's
the bottom line
making
is
them
that
angry?
my mother and father forgive me. So
Okay.
as long as I've got
should.
them on side,
Then you're all right.
I'm
Who cares
okay.
about the siblings?
Yeah,
That's right.
Right? Yes. Now, Darlene, you mentioned, you know, and I don't know if I caught this correctly, but that it was writer's block that propelled you into law school.
It was indeed.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, I had gone west, young woman, to write a novel, and I had decided that it had failed. The penny hadn't dropped. It was actually my second novel.
Where did you go?
I stayed out in Vancouver for
Yeah.
5 months, and
There's no distractions in Vancouver.
oh
That's the
no,
nice thing
I was
about it.
I was hiking every weekend, joined the North Shore hikers.
Supernatural. What am I going to do here?
Fell in love in Vancouver,
Yeah.
which is love is always a huge
Oh,
distraction.
there's-
Yeah.
So when I came back to Toronto, I had lost a sense of direction, and my mother said to me, "Why don't you make something of your life like your friend Irene?" So I decided.
Why don't you do something with your life?
That's right. Since Irene was a lawyer, I decided to write the LSAT on a walk-in, and lo and behold, got accepted at 6 out of 6 universities. So then I felt I had to go.
Yeah.
I had been working in the publishing industry. I was writing book reviews for the Globe and Mail, and I was at Saturday Night Magazine and then Toronto Life Magazine. So I don't know how law was a logical follow-up to that, but
Like what?
That's where I landed.
Why did you even think, oh, I'll go write the LSAT? Why?
She
it
was
was a
goaded
dare.
into it by your
it
mother.
Was, it was literally
Yeah.
a dare to do it on a dare.
Yeah.
And then once I got the acceptances, you feel sucked in. So law was like the ostinato base of the rest of my life. It's like a girdle or a chastity belt. You put it on the brain. But the amazing thing that happened, that once I structured my life in the practice of law, the creativity, rose and fell above it like a melody. And in fact, my call to the bar coincided with the publication of Bottled Roses.
Wow.
And then one thing led to another, and I got married, and I had a baby, and then this film script, Mazzilli Shoes. I was approached by Bernie Zuckerman to produce or to do a film arising out of my Italian background. And this actually took me 10 years to write and never in fact got produced, but it did get published, which was my, Bernie Zuckerman gave it to Nino Ricci to rewrite, and he also couldn't rewrite it, but because I was afraid my baby was being stolen, I actually got this published. And I don't think it's if, but when it gets produced, we'll see.
Yeah.
And so then, I write not always out of my Italian background. This book, Joy, Joy, Why Do I Sing, is one of the title story of that is actually almost a separation story and would grow out of my family law background, but not the legal aspect of it. It's really what I know about families in transition and in trauma of separating experience. So basically I'd drawn it all. Work, play, home, life. But the concept of family as a theme is really important to my writing. And the Making Olives and Other Family Secrets, there it was the concept of how secrets can sabotage us. And every family has skeletons in the cupboard and the untold stories that they don't want to come out. So the Making Olives is a 3-generational story, and it isn't until the 3rd generation that the secrets and the patterns begin to reveal themselves. And I think that's what got the family very upset.
Sure it was.
You know, the black sheep in the family are the most interesting characters to write about, and they're the ones that the traditional family wants to keep suppressed and hidden. So,
Right.
and that's what I go for as a writer.
Hey, I want to ask you about because you mentioned when you were in law school. It's interesting that you should say that once you had this this girdle of your law career, then the creativity of your writing was able to go. And I've often noticed myself that sometimes it's the restrictions that you have, the limitations that are set before you that allow your creativity to flourish. Otherwise, you just got too many options, too much choice.
Well, absolutely, and I think why does some of the best writing come out from repressed countries, and the courage to create in a democratic country? We don't have the same kinds of linguistic or constraints. We have a Charter of Right that supposedly protects us, but can in fact really great literature come out without restraint and confinement? I don't know. I mean, if you look at the Nobel Prize winners within the last number of years, I mean, where are they coming from?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with you that I don't think we can have true creativity without constraints. And my musical background helped me understand this too, because music form, like sonata form, you have an A voice, you have a B voice, you have, you know, how it works itself out and comes back. But structure is extremely important to creativity. It's not just I'm going to take a tube of paint, splash it against a canvas. You have to have a concept of structure, or it does not speak and never leaps and becomes universal.
And you mentioned your musical background, and you wrote, what was it, a Christmas carol that was performed at St. Michael's?
It was.
Yeah.
It's surprising to me. My son went to St. Michael's Choir School, and so I got to know the priests there. And Father Misio kept asking me for years if I would write something, knowing of the literary writing. So I wrote First Gifts, and then it was assigned to a former alumnus to set the music to it. And 2 years ago it was performed at by the choir school at Massey Hall, and I have the CD.
Oh,
and
you
it,
do?
and
Oh,
it's
nice.
one of the highlights of my life.
Wow,
because
I guess so.
because it's one art form which has been expressed by another art form.
Right.
You know, the poetry being expressed by the music. And one of my first publications, which was published by Canadian Forum of the time, Canadian Forum magazine, it was so exciting to see my story illustrated. This was something that had never happened to me before, to have something illustrated. And the cover of this, I was explaining before we went on air, is a Modigliani painting. And my publisher was so wise to choose a deceased artist, because they didn't then have to pay for the rights of a cover. But this cover, which Guernica Editions commissioned, we had quite the fight over it, because I didn't like the man portrayed. My Manzili was very masculine, and as I explained to my publisher at the time, sex sells. Couldn't you make him sexy?
Absolutely.
This is not sexy enough.
It's a little like Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, not the kind of man that a woman would follow across the ocean twice. So.
That's interesting. Are you doing any more work in music?
No, but the man who hath not music, or the woman in her soul, is not to be trusted. So music is a huge part of my life. No, I'm not doing anything more in music.
Well, it sounds like the thrill of seeing your song performed, and then of course the thrill of seeing your story illustrated. What are you going to do when they do one day make a movie out of one of your books? You're going to freak.
I'm going to sit back and watch it. Go for the ride.
Are you going to? So, and again, you wrote this as sort of as a screenplay, and we're talking about Mazzilli's Shoes. In the form that it is right now, it's obviously much more of a story. Would you be the person to write the screenplay?
Well, actually, I'm the person who wrote the screenplay, and it was published in screenplay form.
Oh, it is published in screenplay
so,
form. Okay, I gotcha.
The publisher worried at the time that by publishing it in screenplay form, it would be the death of it ever being a film.
Right.
Well, I guess the proof's in the pudding, and we'll see. I have to die yet to see whether it'll ever be made a film. But it's there and available, and occasionally I read from it, parts from it, and it's quite dramatic, and I enjoy doing this, and then doing this, and then doing that. And playing the many voices.
Right.
What about just having it performed as a play? I wonder if that would be possible.
Well, you know, I sent it to Stratford, and I got a personalized response from the artistic director at the time, who said it would make a great screenplay. He couldn't see it on the stage.
Is that a catch-22?
Yeah.
Run around in circles saying.
So I'm not about
That's
to
funny.
rewrite it unless
Yeah.
there's a real expression of interest.
Right.
But it served what it needed to at the time, which was to keep me writing while I was growing my son, my one and only son.
Wow, that's cool. So now you mentioned when you were in law school too, you wrote this paper about
Libel law, fiction, and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
the Canadian Charter of Rights
Yeah,
and
the
Freedoms.
Canadian, and it was Trudeau at the time. It was just coming out. I was actually, my call to the bar coincided with the Charter of Rights, and it was pretty exciting time to be going to law
Yeah.
school
Why? Because of the charter?
because of the charter. And Pierre Elliott Trudeau came to Osgoode Hall Law School and spoke to us, and
What were your impressions of well, not just Trudeau, but the charter as well, and what it meant for the legal profession and for all Canadians?
I was so excited to be Canadian and to be a woman and to be becoming a lawyer. I'm a member of LEAF, a Legal Education Action Fund, and they started at the same time as I became a lawyer, approximately 25 years ago, and they couldn't have started had Trudeau's Charter of Rights and Freedoms not made equality and women's issues, as well as ethnic issues, put those on the table of Canada. I mean, what is quintessentially Canada is our multiculturalism, our tolerance for everything and anything, including women and children, and so now, you know, continuing to practice and seeing the changes that have occurred. Now we're talking about charters of children's rights, and I mean, we live in a city with over 250 ethnic nationalities represented here. Look, bottom line is, every time is an exciting time to be alive. And 25 years ago, to be going to law school, I was actually taking my mentors as women who were younger than me, because when I grew up, believe it or not, the options were you became a nun, you became a school teacher, you got married, and I forget what the other one was, but there were about 4 options.
Prostitute.
Oh, the oldest profession in the world. So then, you know, looking forward, I had to look back, and I saw younger women than me were going to law school. So I thought, hey, why not?
That's really cool. Now, what are your impressions today when we see? And I know this is getting a little off topic, but you know, but I know you've done thinking about this because you're just all about all this stuff. You know, where do we stand in terms of our personal rights and freedoms here in Canada now? Is the Charter still protecting us, or can it be taken away at the stroke of a pen and orders in council? What's going on in the U.S.? Are you concerned about, you know, the Patriot Act and how it's impacting on all those traditional American freedoms and our Canadian freedoms here?
Yeah, I'm always concerned because I'm an impassioned person, and I don't think we can ever take our rights for granted. What I'm seeing is an almost reverse situation where those who have been so empowered by Canadian rights and freedom are taking away the rights and freedoms of basic Canadian citizens. For example, what's happening to the right to the Lord's Prayer in schools, or Halloween. Why couldn't kids dress up as Talibans if they wanted to be Taliban fighters and go around and knock on doors for Halloween? Because it's offending someone's sensibilities? Well, hello, we're in a free society, and if you don't like it,
You don't have to give them any candy.
that's right, or you keep your doors closed. And
Certainly don't draw any cartoons about them, because that'll get you shot.
But it's really alarming, and you know, so we have fundamental rights and freedoms, but I don't like to see them used in the wrong way.
Right.
Anyway, we have to never take anything for granted.
Yeah,
Hear,
but
hear.
in the legal profession, there you guys are. You're lawyers, and and judges tend to be ex-lawyers. But you know, what's your sense of the legal profession as a whole? is it willing to, when necessary, stand up for those fundamental rights and freedoms?
Oh, absolutely. But here's I'll give you an interesting anecdote. I recently went to family law lawyers and I said, why don't we put on the course load the impact of ethnicity in family law? For example, representing an Oriental family or a Hindu family or a Muslim family. What are the different dynamics there? And I was slapped right down, told that we could never get a course like that through the Law Society. We have to worry about the sensitivities of talking about these issues. But when you have women who cannot come to you and talk about abuse in the home or what's happening to their daughters, and have no way of getting out of an abusive marriage without risking their lives, this has to be talked about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it has come into my practice through mediation courses that I've taken because, for example, Sharia law, which was trying to be recognized as a dispute resolution mechanism. You know, you go before maybe you go before your Jewish tribunal, or you go before your Sharia law tribunal, and you have your affairs of the family resolved in that religious context. Well, our government courageously did not accept that as a dispute resolution form. If you want, family law in Ontario is going to be family law in Ontario as it is on the legislated books by our legislated politicians.
Yeah.
So, and which needs to be.
And those Canadian values that are enshrined in the Charter, they need to be, you know, everybody who's in the country needs to buy into it.
Well, yeah, understand it.
This is
you
the
know,
country.
Yeah.
So if I could segue a little bit, the bleeding in, or the connection between the law and the writing. First of all, long tradition of jurists who are writers, Boston and so on. But go to the root of the word advocate, advocare. It's to speak for, to give voice to tell people's stories. And my most powerful tool of advocacy as a lawyer is my writing skill. I have clients who say to me, wow, I wept when I read that pleading. You told my truth. This is enormously important to my clients. I had a judge not long ago. My pleading was attacked as being too prolix. And the judge at the case conference said to the lawyer on the other side, said to me, well, yes, we know it's too prolix. She said, but Darlene, I couldn't put it down. I heard your client's pain. And that's what I do. I tell my client's story in a way that the case is almost over before we have to even open our mouths. The first time I stood in what was then called weekly court, and the judge told me, I don't need to hear from you. But Your Honor, I have things I have to say. And then I felt this tug at my back on my gown, and I looked behind me, and it was a very senior lawyer, and he mouthed to me, means you've won. Sit down. And it was the written word. It was the written word that had won. So in Toronto, in Canada, I'm not aware of very many writers who are lawyers. We a generation ago had a poet who was a lawyer, and his cases went to the Supreme Court, and I'm going to have a senior's moment and forget his name. But you know, we haven't had a huge tradition of writers and lawyers in Canada, but there is a huge tradition of those creatures in the States, in particular Boston and the East Coast.
Yeah.
So
is this your most recent
this
work,
is
Making Olives and Other Family Secrets?
This is the most recent book entirely dedicated to my writing, but quite a number of my stories have been anthologized, most recently in Descant, a Sicilian publication of Sicilian Canadian writing, and that came out very recently, was launched in Toronto at Grano Restaurant, where I also studied language and linguini. They have a great course there.
Why not? Great place, love Grano.
And what's the, forgive me, but the Bressani Award, I'm not really familiar with it, and this book has won that award. Can you tell us a little bit about
I wasn't familiar with it until I won it either. Bressani was, I understand, an early explorer of Italian descent. I think he was 1700s, possibly 1600s, and was a great writer. He wrote, his diaries went back to the Pope in Rome, and so when Vancouver Cultural Center wanted to start creating a profile for Canadian writing that was growing out of an Italian background, they instituted this Bressani Literary Award. So Nino Ricci has won it. Michael Ondaatje has won it because one of his, he's not Italian, no. But one of his books was partly set in Italy. And a marvelous book. Again, the name of it is escaping me. So, and the year that I won, there was a poet who won, a Jewish poet, and she had one poem about an Italian gardener next door to where she lives, a very fine poet, and she received the award at the same time.
Well, that's great. Well, at least you're in the same company with people like Michael Ondaatje, and that's got to be
very comforting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Now, how do people get your books, and are you doing any openings or any readings or signings or anything like that coming up?
Well, my books, some of them are available through Chapters Indigo, and I ask people to support their small local bookstores, but I have a web page, www.darlenemadott.com, and if you Google Darlene Madott, M-A-D-O-T-T, you can also get to me that way, but www.darlenemadott.com, best way to get me.
That's fabulous.
Best way to get the books.
Now you're working on something new right now?
Yes, it's called Stations of the Heart, and Exile Editions, Barry Callahan, Michael Callahan, son of the famous Canadian author Morley Callahan, son and grandson. They are the publishers of Exile Editions, and they're very interested in one of the short stories in that will be published in the next edition of Exile. So but I'm looking for a whole book in the spring of 2012.
That's great. Well, we would love to, maybe if you'd like to come back and tell us about that, we would love to have you back. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for doing this. DarleneMadott.com. And Stu, let's take a little break.
All right, pal.
And we're going to come back. We got Jim is here, and Diane, and Doina. And we are going to have so much fun as we hit the home stretch here on Liquid Lunch. We'll be right back.
Great.